Transhumanism, abbreviated as H+ or H+, is an international cultural and intellectual movement with an eventual goal of fundamentally transforming the human condition by developing and making widely available technologies to greatly enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capacities. Transhumanist thinkers study the potential benefits and dangers of emerging technologies that could overcome fundamental human limitations, as well as the ethics of developing and using such technologies. They speculate that human beings may eventually be able to transform themselves into beings with such greatly expanded abilities as to merit the label posthuman. The contemporary meaning of the term transhumanism was foreshadowed by one of the first professors of futurology, FM 2030, who taught new concepts of the human at the New School in the 1960s, when he began to identify people who adopt technologies, lifestyles, and worldviews transitional to posthumanity as transhuman. This hypothesis would lay the intellectual groundwork for the British philosopher Max Muller to begin articulating the principles of transhumanism as a futurist philosophy in 1990, and organizing in California an intelligentsia that has since grown into the worldwide transhumanist movement. Influenced by seminal works of science fiction, the transhumanist vision of a transformed future humanity has attracted many supporters and detractors from a wide range of perspectives. Transhumanism has been characterized by one critic, Francis Fukuyama, as among the world's most dangerous ideas, to which Ronald Bailey countered that it is rather the movement that epitomizes the most daring, courageous, imaginative, and idealistic aspirations of humanity. History. The Fountain of Youth by Lucas Cranach the Elder. According to Nick Bostrom, transcendentalist impulses have been expressed at least as far back as in the quest for immortality in the Epic of Gilgamesh, as well as historical quests for the Fountain of Youth, elixir of life, and other efforts to stave off aging and death. There is debate about whether the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche can be considered an influence on transhumanism despite its exaltation of the Übermensch or Superman, due to its emphasis on self-actualization rather than technological transformation. First transhumanist proposals. Julian Huxley, biologist, who coined the term transhumanism in 1957. The fundamental ideas of transhumanism were first mooted in 1923 by the British geneticist J.B.S. Haldane in his essay Daedalus, Science and the Future, which predicted that great benefits would come from applications of advanced sciences to human biology, and that every such advance would first appear to someone as blasphemy or perversion, indecent and unnatural. In particular, he was interested in the development of the science of eugenics, ectogenesis, creating and sustaining life in an artificial environment, and the application of genetics to improve human characteristics, such as health and intelligence. His article prompted a spate of academic and popular interest. J.D. Bernal, a crystallographer at Cambridge, wrote The World, the Flesh, and the Devil in 1929, in which he speculated on the prospects of space colonization and radical changes to human bodies and intelligence through bionic implants and cognitive enhancement. These ideas have been common transhumanist themes ever since. The biologist Julian Huxley is generally regarded as the founder of transhumanism, coining the term in an article written in 1957. Up till now, human life has generally been, as Hobbes described it, nasty, brutish and short. The great majority of human beings, if they have not already died young, have been afflicted with misery. We can justifiably hold the belief that these lands of possibility exist, and that the present limitations and miserable frustrations of our existence could be in large measure surmounted. The human species can, if it wishes, transcend itself, not just sporadically, an individual here in one way, an individual there in another way, but in its entirety, as humanity. This definition differs, albeit not substantially, from the one commonly in use since the 1980s. The ideas raised by these thinkers were explored in the science fiction of the 1960s, notably in Arthur C. Clarke's 2001, a space odyssey in which an alien artifact grants transcendent power to its wielder. Artificial intelligence and the technological singularity. The concept of the technological singularity, or the ultra-rapid advent of superhuman intelligence, was first proposed by the British cryptologist I.J. Good in 1965. Let an ultra-intelligent machine be defined as a machine that can far surpass all the intellectual activities of any man, however clever. Since the design of machines is one of these intellectual activities, an ultra-intelligent machine could design even better machines. There would then unquestionably be an intelligence explosion, and the intelligence of man would be left far behind. Thus the first ultra-intelligent machine is the last invention that man need ever make. Computer scientist Marvin Minsky wrote on relationships between human and artificial intelligence beginning in the 1960s. Over the succeeding decades, this field continued to generate influential thinkers, such as Hans Moravec and Raymond Kurzweil, who oscillated between the technical arena and futuristic speculations in the transhumanist vein. The coalescence of an identifiable transhumanist movement began in the last decades of the 20th century. In 1966, FM 2030, formerly FMS Fondaire, a futurist who taught new concepts of the human at the New School in New York City, began to identify people who adopt technologies, lifestyles, and worldviews transitional to posthumanity as transhuman. In 1972, Robert Ettinger contributed to the conceptualization of transhumanity in his book Man into Superman. FM 2030 published the Upwingers Manifesto in 1973. Growth of Transhumanism. Cover of the first issue of H+ magazine, a web-based quarterly publication that focuses on transhumanism. The first self-described transhumanists met formally in the early 1980s at the University of California, Los Angeles, which became the main center of transhumanist thought. Here, FM 2030 lectured on his third-wave futurist ideology. At the ZTV media venue frequented by transhumanists and other futurists, Natasha Vitomer presented Breaking Away, her 1980 experimental film with the theme of humans breaking away from their biological limitations and the Earth's gravity as they head into space. FM 2030 and Vitomer soon began holding gatherings for transhumanists in Los Angeles, which included students from FM 2030's courses and audiences from Vitomer's artistic productions. In 1982, Vitomer authored the Transhumanist Art Statement. And, 6 years later, produced the cable TV show Trans-Century Update on Transhumanity, a program which reached over 100,000 viewers. In 1986, Eric Drexler published Engines of Creation, The Coming Era of Nanotechnology, which discussed the prospects for nanotechnology and molecular assemblers, and founded the Foresight Institute. As the first non-profit organization to research, advocate for, and perform cryonics, the Southern California offices of the All-Sir Life Extension Foundation became a center for futurists. In 1988, the first issue of Extropy magazine was published by Maximo and Tom Morrow. In 1990, Moore, a strategic philosopher, created his own particular transhumanist doctrine, which took the form of the principles of extropy, and laid the foundation of modern transhumanism by giving it a new definition. Transhumanism is a class of philosophies that seek to guide us towards a post-human condition. Transhumanism shares many elements of humanism, including a respect for reason and science, a commitment to progress, and a valuing of human, or transhuman, existence in this life. Transhumanism differs from humanism in recognizing and anticipating the radical alterations in the nature and possibilities of our lives resulting from various sciences and technologies. In 1992, Morrow founded the Extropy Institute, a catalyst for networking futurists and brainstorming new memeplexes, by organizing a series of conferences, and, more importantly, providing a mailing list, which exposed many to transhumanist views, for the first time during the rise of cyberculture, and the cyberdelic counterculture. In 1998, philosophers Nick Bostrom and David Pearce founded the World Transhumanist Association, WTA, an international non-governmental organization working toward the recognition of transhumanism as a legitimate subject of scientific inquiry and public policy. In 2002, the WTA modified and adopted the Transhumanist Declaration. The Transhumanist FAQ, prepared by the WTA, gave two formal definitions for transhumanism. 1. The intellectual and cultural movement that affirms the possibility and desirability of fundamentally improving the human condition through applied reason, especially by developing and making widely available technologies to eliminate aging and to greatly enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capacities. 2. The study of the ramifications, promises, and potential dangers of technologies that will enable us to overcome fundamental human limitations, and the related study of the ethical matters involved in developing and using such technologies. A number of similar definitions have been collected by Anders Sandberg, an academic and prominent transhumanist. In possible contrast with other transhumanist organizations, WTA officials considered that social forces could undermine their futurist visions and needed to be addressed. A particular concern is the equal access to human enhancement technologies across classes and borders. In 2006, a political struggle within the transhumanist movement between the libertarian right and the liberal left resulted in a more center-leftward positioning of the WTA under its former executive director James Hughes. In 2006, the board of directors of the Extropy Institute ceased operations of the organization, stating that its mission was essentially completed. This left the World Transhumanist Association as the leading international transhumanist organization. In 2008, as part of a rebranding effort, the WTA changed its name to Humanity Plus. Humanity Plus and Better Humans publish Age Plus magazine, a periodical edited by RU Series which disseminates transhumanist news and ideas. In 2012, the Transhumanist Longevity Party had been initiated as an international union of people who promote the development of scientific and technological means to significant life extension that for now has more than 30 national organizations. Transhumanist-themed blogs by Zoltan Isvan are in mainstream media on Psychology Today and the Huffington Post. The first transhumanist elected member of a parliament is Giuseppe Vitino, in Italy. Theory. It is a matter of debate whether transhumanism is a branch of posthumanism, and how posthumanism should be conceptualized with regard to transhumanism. The latter is often referred to as a variant or activist form of posthumanism by its conservative, Christian, and progressive critics. A common feature of transhumanism and philosophical posthumanism is the future vision of a new intelligent species into which humanity will evolve, which will supplement humanity or supersede it. Transhumanism stresses the evolutionary perspective, including sometimes the creation of a highly intelligent animal species by way of cognitive enhancement, i.e. biological uplift, but clings to a post-human future as the final goal of participant evolution. Nevertheless, the idea of creating intelligent artificial beings, proposed, for example, by roboticist Hans Moravec, has influenced transhumanism. Moravec's ideas and transhumanism have also been characterized as a complacent or apocalyptic variant of posthumanism, and contrasted with cultural posthumanism in humanities and the arts. While such a cultural posthumanism would offer resources for rethinking the relations of humans and increasingly sophisticated machines, transhumanism and similar posthumanisms are, in this view, not abandoning obsolete concepts of the autonomous liberal subject, but are expanding its prerogatives into the realm of the posthuman. Transhumanist self-characterizations as a continuation of humanism and Enlightenment thinking correspond with this view. Some secular humanists conceive transhumanism as an offspring of the humanist freethought movement, and argue that transhumanists differ from the humanist mainstream by having a specific focus on technological approaches to resolving human concerns, i.e. technocentrism, and on the issue of mortality. However, other progressives have argued that posthumanism, whether it be its philosophical or activist forms, amounts to a shift away from concerns about social justice, from the reform of human institutions, and from other Enlightenment preoccupations, toward narcissistic longings for a transcendence of the human body in quest of more exquisite ways of being. In this view, transhumanism is abandoning the goals of humanism, the Enlightenment, and progressive politics. The philosophy of transhumanism is closely related to techno-self-studies, an interdisciplinary domain of scholarly research dealing with all aspects of human identity, in a technological society focusing on the changing nature of relationships between the human and technology. Aims. Raymond Kurzweil believes a countdown to when human life will be irreversibly transformed can be made through plotting major world events on a graph. While many transhumanist theorists and advocates seek to apply reason, science, and technology for the purposes of reducing poverty, disease, disability, and malnutrition around the globe, transhumanism is distinctive in its particular focus on the applications of technologies to the improvement of human bodies at the individual level. Many transhumanists actively assess the potential for future technologies and innovative social systems to improve the quality of all life, while seeking to make the material reality of the human condition fulfill the promise of legal and political equality by eliminating congenital mental and physical barriers. Transhumanist philosophers argue that there not only exists a perfectionist ethical imperative for humans to strive for progress and improvement of the human condition, but that it is possible and desirable for humanity to enter a transhuman phase of existence, in which humans are in control of their own evolution. In such a phase, natural evolution would be replaced with deliberate change. Some theorists, such as Raymond Kurzweil, think that the pace of technological innovation is accelerating, and that the next 50 years may yield not only radical technological advances, but possibly a technological singularity, which may fundamentally change the nature of human beings. Transhumanists who foresee this massive technological change generally maintain that it is desirable. However, some are also concerned with the possible dangers of extremely rapid technological change, and propose options for ensuring that advanced technology is used responsibly. For example, Bostrom has written extensively on existential risks to humanity's future welfare, including risks that could be created by emerging technologies. While many people believe that all transhumanists are striving for immortality, it is not necessarily true. Hank Pellissier, Managing Director of the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technologies, 2011 to 2012, now held by Chris Notaro, 2012, surveyed transhumanists, and of the 818 respondents, 23.8% did not want immortality. Some of the reasons were that they would be bored, Earth's overpopulation, and that they wanted to go to an afterlife. Ethics. Transhumanists engage in interdisciplinary approaches to understanding and evaluating possibilities for overcoming biological limitations by drawing on futurology and various fields of ethics. Unlike many philosophers, social critics, and activists who place a moral value on preservation of natural systems, transhumanists see the very concept of the specifically natural as problematically nebulous at best, and an obstacle to progress at worst. In keeping with this, many prominent transhumanist advocates refer to transhumanism's critics on the political right and left jointly as bioconservatives or bioluddites, the latter term alluding to the 19th century anti-industrialization social movement that opposed the replacement of human manual laborers by machines. Many believe that transhumanism can cause unfair human enhancement in many areas of life, but specifically on the social plane. This can be compared to steroid use, where if one athlete uses steroids in sports he has an advantage over those who do not. The same scenario can happen when people have certain neural implants that gives them an advantage in the workplace and in educational aspects. Currents. There is a variety of opinion within transhumanist thought. Many of the leading transhumanist thinkers hold views that are under constant revision and development. Some distinctive currents of transhumanism are identified and listed here in alphabetical order. Abolitionism, bioethics, an ethical ideology based upon a perceived obligation to use technology to eliminate involuntary suffering in all sentient life. Democratic transhumanism, a political ideology synthesizing liberal democracy, social democracy, radical democracy, and transhumanism. Extropianism, an early school of transhumanist thought characterized by a set of principles advocating a proactive approach to human evolution. Immortalism, a moral ideology based upon the belief that radical life extension and technological immortality is possible and desirable, and advocating research and development to ensure its realization. Libertarian transhumanism, a political ideology synthesizing libertarianism and transhumanism. Postgenderism, a social philosophy which seeks the voluntary elimination of gender in the human species through the application of advanced biotechnology and assisted reproductive technologies. Singularitarianism, a moral ideology based upon the belief that a technological singularity is possible, and advocating deliberate action to effect it and ensure its safety. Technogaianism, an ecological ideology based upon the belief that emerging technologies can help restore Earth's environment, and that developing safe, clean, alternative technology should therefore be an important goal of environmentalists. Spirituality. Although some transhumanists report having religious or spiritual views, they are for the most part atheists, agnostics, or secular humanists. Despite the prevailing secular attitude, some transhumanists pursue hopes traditionally espoused by religions, such as immortality, while several controversial new religious movements, originating in the late 20th century, have explicitly embraced transhumanist goals of transforming the human condition by applying technology to the alteration of the mind and body, such as realism. However, most thinkers associated with the transhumanist movement focus on the practical goals of using technology to help achieve longer and healthier lives, while speculating that future understanding of neurotheology and the application of neurotechnology will enable humans to gain greater control of altered states of consciousness, which were commonly interpreted as spiritual experiences, and thus achieve more profound self-knowledge. Many transhumanists believe in the compatibility of human minds with computer hardware, with the theoretical implication that human consciousness may someday be transferred to alternative media, a speculative technique commonly known as mind uploading. One extreme formulation of this idea, which some transhumanists are interested in, is the proposal of the Omega Point by Christian cosmologist Frank Tipler. Drawing upon ideas in digitalism, Tipler has advanced the notion that the collapse of the universe billions of years hence could create the conditions for the perpetuation of humanity in a simulated reality with an omega computer, and thus achieve a form of posthuman godhood. Tipler's thought was inspired by the writings of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a paleontologist and Jesuit theologian, who saw an evolutionary telos in the development of an encompassing noosphere, a global consciousness. Viewed from the perspective of some Christian thinkers, the idea of mind uploading is asserted to represent a denigration of the human body characteristic of Gnostic knowledge and belief. Transhumanism and its presumed intellectual progenitors have also been described as neo-Gnostic by non-Christian and secular commentators. The first dialogue between transhumanism and faith was a one-day conference held at the University of Toronto in 2004. Religious critics alone faulted the philosophy of transhumanism as offering no eternal truths, nor a relationship with the divine. They commented that a philosophy bereft of these beliefs leaves humanity adrift in a foggy sea of postmodern cynicism and anime. Transhumanists responded that such criticisms reflect a failure to look at the actual content of the transhumanist philosophy, which far from being cynical, is rooted in optimistic, idealistic attitudes that trace back to the Enlightenment. Following this dialogue, William Sims Bainbridge, a sociologist of religion, conducted a pilot study, published in the Journal of Evolution and Technology, suggesting that religious attitudes were negatively correlated with acceptance of transhumanist ideas, and indicating that individuals with highly religious worldviews tended to perceive transhumanism as being a direct, competitive, though ultimately futile, affront to their spiritual beliefs. Since 2009, the American Academy of Religion holds a Transhumanism and Religion consultation during its annual meeting, where scholars in the field of religious studies seek to identify and critically evaluate any implicit religious beliefs that might underlie key transhumanist claims and assumptions, consider how transhumanism challenges religious traditions to develop their own ideas of the human future, in particular the prospect of human transformation, whether by technological or other means, and provide critical and constructive assessments of an envisioned future that place greater confidence in nanotechnology, robotics, and information technology to achieve virtual immortality and create a superior post-human species. Practice. While some transhumanists take an abstract and theoretical approach to the perceived benefits of emerging technologies, others have offered specific proposals for modifications to the human body, including heritable ones. Transhumanists are often concerned with methods of enhancing the human nervous system. Though some propose modification of the peripheral nervous system, the brain is considered the common denominator of personhood, and is thus a primary focus of transhumanist ambitions. As proponents of self-improvement and body modification, transhumanists tend to use existing technologies and techniques that supposedly improve cognitive and physical performance, while engaging in routines and lifestyles designed to improve health and longevity. Depending on their age, some transhumanists express concern that they will not live to reap the benefits of future technologies. However, many have a great interest in life extension strategies, and in funding research in cryonics in order to make the latter a viable option of last resort rather than remaining an unproven method. Regional and global transhumanist networks and communities, with a range of objectives, exist to provide support and forums for discussion and collaborative projects. Technologies of interest. Converging Technologies, a 2002 report exploring the potential for synergy among nanobioinfo and cognotechnologies, has become a landmark in near-future technological speculation. Transhumanists support the emergence and convergence of technologies including nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive science, NBIC, and hypothetical future technologies including simulated reality, artificial intelligence, superintelligence, mind uploading, chemical brain preservation, and cryonics. They believe that humans can, and should use these technologies to become more than human. They therefore support the recognition and/or protection of cognitive liberty, morphological freedom, and procreative liberty as civil liberties, so as to guarantee individuals the choice of using human enhancement technologies on themselves and their children. Some speculate that human enhancement techniques and other emerging technologies may facilitate more radical human enhancement no later than the midpoint of the 21st century. Kurzweil's book The Singularity is Near, and Mikio Kakis's book Physics of the Future both outline various human enhancement technologies, and give insight on how these technologies may impact the human race. Some reports on the converging technologies and NBIC concepts have criticized their transhumanist orientation and alleged science-fictional character. At the same time, research on brain and body alteration technologies has accelerated under the sponsorship of the U.S. Department of Defense, which is interested in the battlefield advantages they would provide to the super soldiers of the United States and its allies. There has already been a brain research program to extend the ability to manage information, while military scientists are now looking at stretching the human capacity for combat to a maximum 168 hours without sleep. Neuroscientist Anders Sandberg has been practicing on the method of scanning ultra-thin sections of the brain. This method is being used to help better understand the architecture of the brain. As of now, this method is currently being used on mice. This is the first step towards uploading of the human brain, including memories and emotions, onto a computer. Arts and culture. Transhumanist themes have become increasingly prominent in various literary forms during the period in which the movement itself has emerged. Contemporary science fiction often contains positive renditions of technologically enhanced human life, set in utopian, especially techno-utopian, societies. However, science fiction's depictions of enhanced humans, or other post-human beings, frequently come with a cautionary twist. The more pessimistic scenarios include many horrific or dystopian tales of human bioengineering gone wrong. In the decades immediately before transhumanism emerged as an explicit movement, many transhumanist concepts and themes began appearing in the speculative fiction of authors of the golden age of science fiction such as Robert A. Heinlein, Lazarus Long series, 1941-87, A. E. Van Vogt, Slan, 1946, Isaac Asimov, I, Robot, 1950, Arthur C. Clarke, Childhood's End, 1953, and Stanis A. W. Lem, Subaryov, 1967. C.S. Lewis' That Hideous Strength, 1945, contains an early critique of transhumanism. In a series of science fiction novels by Neil Asher, the protagonist is an augmented human who carries out missions for Earth Central Security, an artificial intelligence and superhuman coalition. The author portrays a variety of augmentations in addition to the copying of memory/human minds into crystals and the presence of both benevolent and malevolent artificial intelligences. The cyberpunk genre, exemplified by William Gibson's Neuromancer, 1984, and Bruce Sterling's Schismatrix, 1985, has particularly been concerned with the modification of human bodies. Other novels dealing with transhumanist themes that have stimulated broad discussion of these issues include Blood Music, 1985, by Greg Bear, the Xenogenesis Trilogy, 1987-1989, by Octavia Butler, The Beggar's Trilogy, 1990-94, by Nancy Kress. Much of Greg Egan's work since the early 1990s, such as Permutation City, 1994, and Diaspora, 1997, The Culture series of Ian M. Banks. The Bow Remaker, 1995, by Linda Nagata, Altered Carbon, 2002, by Richard K. Morgan, Oryx, and Craig, 2003, by Margaret Atwood, The Elementary Particles, in Trance, 2001, and The Possibility of an Island, in Trance, 2006, by Michelle Llewellyn-Beck, Mindscan, 2005, by Robert J. Sawyer, The Commonwealth Saga, 2002-10, by Peter F. Hamilton and Glasshouse, 2005, by Charles Strauss. Some, but not all, of these works are considered part of the cyberpunk genre, or its post-cyberpunk offshoot. The Dan Brown novel Inferno, and the Zoltan S. Van novel The Transhumanist Wager focus on the theme of transhumanism. 87. Fictional transhumanist scenarios have also become popular in other media during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Such treatments are found in comic books, Captain America, 1941, Transmetropolitan, 1997, The Surrogates, 2006, Films, 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968, Blade Runner, 1982, Gattaca, 1997, television series, The Cybermen of Doctor Who, 1966, The Borg of Star Trek, The Next Generation, 1989, manga and anime, Galaxy Express 999, 1978, Appleseed, 1985, Ghost in the Shell, 1989, Neon Genesis Evangelion, 1995, and the Gundam Meta-Series, 1979. Video games, Metal Gear Solid, 1998, Deus Ex, 2000, BioShock, 2008, Half-Life 2, 2004, Crisis, 2007, Deus Ex, Human Revolution, 2011, and role-playing games, Carnal art, a form of sculpture originated by the French artist Orlan, uses the body as its medium and plastic surgery as its method. The French biological anthropologist Dr. Judith Nikogashian also works on representations of the hybrid body. Debate. The very notion and prospect of human enhancement and related issues arouse public controversy. Criticisms of transhumanism and its proposals take two main forms: those objecting to the likelihood of transhumanist goals being achieved, practical criticisms, and those objecting to the moral principles or worldview sustaining transhumanist proposals, or underlying transhumanism itself, ethical criticisms. However, these two strains sometimes converge and overlap, particularly when considering the ethics of changing human biology in the face of incomplete knowledge. Critics or opponents often see transhumanist goals as posing threats to human values. Some also argue that strong advocacy of a transhumanist approach to improving the human condition might divert attention and resources from social solutions. Sometimes, however, there are strong disagreements about the very principles involved, with divergent views on humanity, human nature, and the morality of transhumanist aspirations. At least one public interest organization, the U.S.-based Center for Genetics and Society, was formed in 2001 with the specific goal of opposing transhumanist agendas that involve transgenerational modification of human biology, such as full-term human cloning and germinal choice technology. The Institute on Biotechnology and the Human Future of the Chicago-Kent College of Law critically scrutinizes proposed applications of genetic and nanotechnologies to human biology in an academic setting. Some of the most widely known critics of the transhumanist program refer to novels and fictional films. These works of art, despite presenting imagined worlds rather than philosophical analyses, are used as touchstones for some of the more formal arguments. Feasibility. In a 1992 book, sociologist Max Devlin pointed to many past failed predictions of technological progress and argued that modern futurist predictions would prove similarly inaccurate. He also objected to what he saw as scientism, fanaticism, and nihilism by a few in advancing transhumanist causes, and said that historical parallels excised to millenarian religions and communist doctrines. Although generally sympathetic to transhumanism, public health professor Gregory Stock is skeptical of the technical feasibility and mass appeal of the cyborgization of humanity predicted by Raymond Kurzweil, Hans Moravec, and Kevin Warwick. He said that throughout the 21st century, many humans would find themselves deeply integrated into systems of machines, but would remain biological. Primary changes to their own form and character would arise not from cyberware, but from the direct manipulation of their genetics, metabolism, and biochemistry. Those thinkers who defend the likelihood of accelerating change point to a past pattern of exponential increases in humanity's technological capacities. Kurzweil developed this position in his 2005 book, The Singularity is Near. Hubris. It has been argued that in transhumanist thought humans attempt to substitute themselves for God. This approach is exemplified by the 2002 Vatican Statement Communion and Stewardship, Human Persons Created in the Image of God, in which it is stated that, changing the genetic identity of man as a human person through the production of an infrahuman being is radically immoral, implying, as it would, that man has full right of disposal over his own biological nature. At the same time, this statement argues that creation of a superhuman, or spiritually superior being is unthinkable, since true improvement can come only through religious experience and realizing more fully the image of God. Christian theologians and lay activists of several churches and denominations have expressed similar objections to transhumanism and claimed that Christians attain in the afterlife what radical transhumanism promises, such as indefinite life extension or the abolition of suffering. In this view, transhumanism is just another representative of the long line of utopian movements which seek to create heaven on earth. The biocomplexity spiral is a depiction of the multi-leveled complexity of organisms in their environments, which is seen by many critics as the ultimate obstacle to transhumanist ambition. Another critique is aimed mainly at allogyny, which Jeremy Rifkin defined as the upgrading of existing organisms and the design of wholly new ones with the intent of perfecting their performance, and, more specifically, attempts to pursue transhumanist goals by way of genetically modifying human embryos in order to create designer babies. It emphasizes the issue of biocomplexity and the unpredictability of attempts to guide the development of products of biological evolution. This argument, elaborated in particular by the biologist Stuart Newman, is based on the recognition that the cloning and germline genetic engineering of animals are error-prone and inherently disruptive of embryonic development. Accordingly, so it is argued, it would create unacceptable risks to use such methods on human embryos. Performing experiments, particularly ones with permanent biological consequences, on developing humans would thus be in violation of accepted principles governing research on human subjects. See the 1964 Declaration of Helsinki. Moreover, because improvements in experimental outcomes in one species are not automatically transferable to a new species without further experimentation, there is claimed to be no ethical route to genetic manipulation of humans at early developmental stages. As a practical matter, however, international protocols on human subject research may not present a legal obstacle to attempts by transhumanists and others to improve their offspring by germinal choice technology. According to legal scholar Kirsten Raby-Smolensky, existing laws would protect parents who choose to enhance their child's genome from future liability arising from adverse outcomes of the procedure. Religious thinkers allied with transhumanist goals, such as the theologians Ronald Cole Turner and Ted Peters, reject the first argument, holding that the doctrine of co-creation provides an obligation to use genetic engineering to improve human biology. Transhumanists and other supporters of human genetic engineering do not dismiss the second argument out of hand, insofar as there is a high degree of uncertainty about the likely outcomes of genetic modification experiments in humans. However, bioethicist James Hughes suggests that one possible ethical route to the genetic manipulation of humans at early developmental stages is the building of computer models of the human genome, the proteins it specifies, and the tissue engineering he argues that it also codes for. With the exponential progress in bioinformatics, Hughes believes that a virtual model of genetic expression in the human body will not be far behind and that it will soon be possible to accelerate approval of genetic modifications by simulating their effects on virtual humans. Public health professor Gregory Stock points to artificial chromosomes as an alleged safer alternative to existing genetic engineering techniques. Transhumanists therefore argue that parents have a moral responsibility called procreative beneficence to make use of these methods if and when they are shown to be reasonably safe and effective, to have the healthiest children possible. They add that this responsibility is a moral judgment best left to individual conscience rather than imposed by law in all but extreme cases. In this context, the emphasis on freedom of choice called procreative liberty. Contempt for the flesh. Philosopher Mary Midgley, in her 1992 book Science as Salvation, traces the notion of achieving immortality by transcendence of the material human body, echoed in the transhumanist tenet of mind uploading, to a group of male scientific thinkers of the early 20th century, including J.B.S. Haldane and members of his circle. She characterizes these ideas as quasi-scientific dreams and prophesies involving visions of escape from the body coupled with self-indulgent, uncontrolled power fantasies. Her argument focuses on what she perceives as the pseudo-scientific speculations and irrational, fear-of-death-driven fantasies of these thinkers, their disregard for laymen, and the remoteness of their eschatological visions. What is perceived as contempt for the flesh in the writings of Marvin Minsky, Hans Moravec, and some transhumanists has also been the target of other critics for what they claim to be an instrumental conception of the human body. Reflecting a strain of feminist criticism of the transhumanist program, philosopher Susan Bordeaux points to contemporary obsessions with slenderness, youth, and physical perfection which she sees as affecting both men and women, but in distinct ways, as the logical, if extreme, manifestations of anxieties and fantasies fostered by our culture. Some critics question other social implications of the movement's focus on body modification. Political scientist Klaus Gerd Giesen, in particular, has asserted that transhumanism's concentration on altering the human body represents the logical yet tragic consequence of atomized individualism and body commodification within a consumer culture. Nick Bostrom asserts that the desire to regain youth, specifically, and transcend the natural limitations of the human body, in general, is pan-cultural and pan-historical, and is therefore not uniquely tied to the culture of the 20th century. He argues that the transhumanist program is an attempt to channel that desire into a scientific project on par with the Human Genome Project, and achieve humanity's oldest hope, rather than a puerile fantasy, or social trend, trivialization of human identity. In the U.S., the Amish are a religious group probably most known for their avoidance of certain modern technologies. Transhumanists draw a parallel by arguing that in the near future there will probably be humanish people who choose to stay human by not adopting human enhancement technologies, whose choice they believe must be respected and protected. In his 2003 book Enough, Staying Human, in an Engineered Age, environmental ethicist Bill McKibben argued at length against many of the technologies that are postulated or supported by transhumanists, including germinal choice technology, nanomedicine and life extension strategies. He claims that it would be morally wrong for humans to tamper with fundamental aspects of themselves or their children in an attempt to overcome universal human limitations, such as vulnerability to aging, maximum lifespan, and biological constraints on physical and cognitive ability. Attempts to improve themselves through such manipulation would remove limitations that provide a necessary context for the experience of meaningful human choice. He claims that human lives would no longer seem meaningful in a world where such limitations could be overcome technologically. Even the goal of using germinal choice technology for clearly therapeutic purposes should be relinquished, since it would inevitably produce temptations to tamper with such things as cognitive capacities. He argues that it is possible for societies to benefit from renouncing particular technologies, using as examples Ming China, Tokugawa Japan, and the contemporary Amish. Giuseppe Vatino, a supporter of transhumanism elected as a member of parliament in Italy, believes that although transhumanism may make us less human, there are both positive and negative consequences. He believes that transhumanism will make people less subject to the whims of nature, such as illness or climate extremes. Transhumanists and other supporters of technological alteration of human biology, such as science journalist Ronald Bailey, reject as extremely subjective the claim that life would be experienced as meaningless if some human limitations are overcome with enhancement technologies. They argue that these technologies will not remove the bulk of the individual and social challenges humanity faces. They suggest that a person with greater abilities would tackle more advanced and difficult projects and continue to find meaning in the struggle to achieve excellence. Bailey also claims that McKibben's historical examples are flawed and support different conclusions when studied more closely. For example, few groups are more cautious than the Amish about embracing new technologies, but though they shun television and use horses and buggies, some are welcoming the possibilities of gene therapy, since inbreeding has afflicted them with a number of rare genetic diseases. Genetic divide. Some critics of libertarian transhumanism have focused on its likely socio-economic consequences in societies in which divisions between rich and poor are on the rise. Bill McKibben, for example, suggests that emerging human enhancement technologies would be disproportionately available to those with greater financial resources, thereby exacerbating the gap between rich and poor, and creating a genetic divide. Liam Silver, a biologist and science writer who coined the term reprogenetics and supports its applications, has nonetheless expressed concern that these methods could create a two-tiered society of genetically engineered haves and have-nots if social democratic reforms lag behind implementation of enhancement technologies. Critics who make these arguments do not thereby necessarily accept the transhumanist assumption that human enhancement is a positive value. In their view, it should be discouraged or even banned because it could confer additional power upon the already powerful. The 1997 film Gattaka's depiction of a dystopian society, in which one social class depends entirely on genetic modifications, is often cited by critics in support of these views. These criticisms are also voiced by non-libertarian transhumanist advocates, especially self-described democratic transhumanists, who believe that the majority of current or future social and environmental issues, such as unemployment and resource depletion, need to be addressed by a combination of political and technological solutions, such as a guaranteed minimum income and alternative technology. Therefore, on the specific issue of an emerging genetic divide due to unequal access to human enhancement technologies, bioethicist James Hughes, in his 2004 book Citizen Cyborg, Why Democratic Societies Must Respond to the Redesigned Human of the Future, argues that progressives, or, more precisely, techno-progressives must articulate and implement public policies, such as a universal healthcare voucher system that covers human enhancement technologies, in order to attenuate this problem as much as possible, rather than trying to ban human enhancement technologies. The latter, he argues, might actually worsen the problem by making these technologies unsafe or available only to the wealthy on the local black market, or in countries where such a ban is not enforced. Threats to morality and democracy. Various arguments have been made to the effect that a society that adopts human enhancement technologies may come to resemble the dystopia depicted in the 1932 novel Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Sometimes, as in the writings of Leon Kass, the fear is that various institutions and practices judged as fundamental to civilized society would be damaged or destroyed. In his 2002 book Our Posthuman Future, and in a 2004 Foreign Policy magazine article, political economist and philosopher Francis Fukuyama designates transhumanism the world's most dangerous idea because he believes that it may undermine the egalitarian ideals of democracy in general and liberal democracy in particular, through a fundamental alteration of human nature. Social philosopher Jürgen Habermas makes a similar argument in his 2003 book The Future of Human Nature, in which he asserts that moral autonomy depends on not being subject to another's unilaterally imposed specifications. Habermas thus suggests that the human species ethic would be undermined by embryo-stage genetic alteration. Critics such as Kass, Fukuyama, and a variety of authors hold that attempts to significantly alter human biology are not only inherently immoral, but also threaten the social order. Alternatively, they argue that implementation of such technologies would likely lead to the naturalizing of social hierarchies, or place new means of control in the hands of totalitarian regimes. The AI pioneer Joseph Weizenbaum criticizes what he sees as misanthropic tendencies in the language and ideas of some of his colleagues, in particular Marvin Minsky and Hans Moravec, which, by devaluing the human organism per se, promotes a discourse that enables divisive and undemocratic social policies. In a 2004 article in the Libertarian Monthly Reason, science journalist Ronald Bailey has contested the assertions of Fukuyama by arguing that political equality has never rested on the facts of human biology. He asserts that liberalism was founded not on the proposition of effective equality of human beings, or de facto equality, but on the assertion of an equality in political rights, and before the law, or de jure equality. Bailey asserts that the products of genetic engineering may well ameliorate rather than exacerbate human inequality, giving to the many what were once the privileges of the few. Moreover, he argues, the crowning achievement of the Enlightenment is the principle of tolerance. In fact, he argues, political liberalism is already the solution to the issue of human and post-human rights, since, in liberal societies, the law is meant to apply equally to all, no matter how rich or poor, powerful or powerless, educated or ignorant, enhanced or unenhanced. Other thinkers who are sympathetic to transhumanist ideas, such as philosopher Russell Blackford, have also objected to the appeal to tradition, and what they see as alarmism, involved in Brave New World-type arguments. Dehumanization. Biopolitical activist Jeremy Rifkin and biologist Stuart Newman accept that biotechnology has the power to make profound changes in organismal identity. They argue against the genetic engineering of human beings because they fear the blurring of the boundary between human and artifact. Philosopher Key Cockley sees such developments as part of an accelerating trend in modernization in which technology has been used to transform the natural into the artifactual. In the extreme, this could lead to the manufacturing and enslavement of monsters such as human clones, human-animal chimeras or bioroids, but even lesser dislocations of humans and non-humans from social and ecological systems are seen as problematic. The film Blade Runner, 1982, the novels The Boys from Brazil, 1978, and The Island of Dr. Moreau, 1896, depict elements of such scenarios, but Mary Shelley's 1818 novel Frankenstein is most often alluded to by critics, who suggest that biotechnologies could create objectified and socially unmoored people and subhumans. Such critics propose that strict measures be implemented to prevent what they portray as dehumanizing possibilities from ever happening, usually in the form of an international ban on human genetic engineering. Others believe that we are morally obligated to help the human race transcend its biological limits. In fact, they go so far as to call those who are opposed to them Bioluddites. Though the gamut of transhumanist opinions ranges from those who believe that we will eventually be cyborgs to those who simply want their brains frozen in the hopes of being resuscitated in the future, all have considered the question of the human identity and whether or not it will be compromised. While the concept of being able to do away with negative emotions is appealing in theory, there are possible negative implications. For example, Francis Fukuyama, a political scientist, points out that if we did not have the emotion of aggression, we wouldn't be able to defend ourselves. These would not only affect our humanity, but also our interactions with others. Writing in Reason magazine, Ronald Bailey has accused opponents of research involving the modification of animals as indulging in alarmism, when they speculate about the creation of subhuman creatures with human-like intelligence and brains resembling those of Homo sapiens. Bailey insists that the aim of conducting research on animals is simply to produce human healthcare benefits. A different response comes from transhumanist personhood theorists, who object to what they characterize as the anthropomophobia fueling some criticisms of this research, which science fiction writer Isaac Asimov termed the Frankenstein complex. They argue that, provided they are self-aware, human clones, human-animal chimeras, and uplifted animals would all be unique persons deserving of respect, dignity, rights, and citizenship. They conclude that the coming ethical issue is not the creation of so-called monsters, but what they characterize as the yuck factor and human racism that would judge and treat these creations as monstrous. Spectre of coercive eugenicism. Some critics of transhumanism allege an ableist bias in their use of such concepts as limitations, enhancement, and improvement. Some even see the old eugenics, social Darwinist, and master race ideologies and programs of the past as warnings of what the promotion of eugenic enhancement technologies might unintentionally encourage. Some fear future eugenics wars as the worst-case scenario, the return of coercive state-sponsored genetic discrimination, and human rights violations such as compulsory sterilization of persons with genetic defects. The killing of the institutionalized and, specifically, segregation from, and genocide of, races perceived as inferior. Health law professor George Annis and technology law professor Laurie Andrews are prominent advocates of the position that the use of these technologies could lead to such human post-human caste warfare. For most of its history, eugenics has manifested itself as a movement to sterilize the genetically unfit against their will, and encourage the selective breeding of the genetically fit. The major transhumanist organizations strongly condemn the coercion involved in such policies, and reject the racist and classist assumptions on which they were based, along with the pseudo-scientific notions that eugenic improvements could be accomplished in a practically meaningful time frame through selective human breeding. Most transhumanist thinkers instead advocate new eugenics, a form of egalitarian liberal eugenics. In their 2000 book From Chance to Choice, Genetics and Justice, Non-Transhumanist, bioethicist Alan Buchanan, Dan Brock, Norman Daniels and Daniel Wickler have argued that liberal societies have an obligation to encourage as wide an adoption of eugenic enhancement technologies as possible, so long as such policies do not infringe on individuals' reproductive rights, or exert undue pressures on prospective parents to use these technologies in order to maximize public health and minimize the inequalities that may result from both natural genetic endowments and unequal access to genetic enhancements. Most transhumanists holding similar views nonetheless distance themselves from the term eugenics, preferring germinal choice or reprogenetics, to avoid having their position confused with the discredited theories and practices of early 20th century eugenic movements. Existential risks. Struck by a passage from Anna Bomber Theodore Kaczynski's Anarcho-Primitivist Manifesto, quoted in Kurzweil's 1999 book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, computer scientist Bill Joy became a notable critic of emerging technologies. Joy's 2000 essay Why the Future Doesn't Need Us argues that human beings would likely guarantee their own extinction by developing the technologies favored by transhumanists. It invokes, for example, the Grey Goose scenario, where out-of-control self-replicating nanorobots could consume entire ecosystems, resulting in global ecophagy. Joy's warning was seized upon by appropriate technology organizations such as the Etc. Group. Related notions were also voiced by self-described Neo-Luddite Kyle Lawson, a culture jammer, who co-authored a 2001 spoof of Donna Haraway's 1985 Cyborg Manifesto. As a critique of the techno-utopianism he interpreted it as promoting. Lawson argues that high technology development should be completely relinquished, since it inevitably serves corporate interests, with devastating consequences on society and the environment. In his 2003 book Our Final Hour, British astronomer Royal Martin Rees argues that advanced science and technology bring as much risk of disaster as opportunity for progress. However, Rees does not advocate a halt to scientific activity. He calls for tighter security and perhaps an end to traditional scientific openness. Advocates of the precautionary principle, such as many in the environmental movement, also favor slow, careful progress, or a halt in potentially dangerous areas. Some precautionalists believe that artificial intelligence and robotics present possibilities of alternative forms of cognition that may threaten human life. The Terminator franchise's doomsday depiction of the emergence of an AI that becomes a superintelligence, Skynet, a malignant computer network which initiates a nuclear war in order to exterminate the human species, has often been cited by some involved in this debate. Transhumanists do not necessarily rule out specific restrictions on emerging technologies, so as to lessen the prospect of existential risk. Generally, however, they counter that proposals based on the precautionary principle are often unrealistic, and sometimes even counterproductive, as opposed to the techno-Gaian current of transhumanism which they claim is both realistic and productive. In his television series Connections, science historian James Burke dissects several views on technological change, including precautionism and the restriction of open inquiry. Burke questions the practicality of some of these views, but concludes that maintaining the status quo of inquiry and development poses hazards of its own, such as a disorienting rate of change and the depletion of our planet's resources. The common transhumanist position is a pragmatic one, where society takes deliberate action to ensure the early arrival of the benefits of safe, clean, alternative technology rather than fostering what it considers to be anti-scientific views and technophobia. One transhumanist solution proposed by Nick Bostrom is differential technological development, in which attempts would be made to influence the sequence in which technologies developed. In this approach, planners would strive to retard the development of possibly harmful technologies and their applications, while accelerating the development of likely beneficial technologies, especially those that offer protection against the harmful effects of others. An argument for an anti-progressionist and pessimistic version of transhumanism has also been presented by Philippe Verdoux.